Welcome to a slightly different video from AutoTrader.co.za, where we have two vehicles, and it's a little difficult to review two vehicles back to back as one person. So I've roped in a little bit of help, but these are two rather special vehicles. Sean,
Yeah.
welcome.
All electric Volvos.
And the first of their kind for Volvo.
Yes, absolutely. And the car behind me here is the only one in the country at the moment.
Because that is the new P6.
Yes.
So we've heard rumblings about XC40 P8 Twin.
Yeah.
What is that? It's XC40
P8 Twin.
P8 Twin. No, but there's a Recharge in there somewhere.
Recharge Twin, and this one just says Recharge.
Just
at the back.
Recharge, okay.
That's pretty much the only way you can tell them apart if you look at them. So
Because they are virtually identical. So
Yeah.
they've done away, because they've received a facelift now for 2022.
Yep.
The XC40 received a facelift, and this is across, well, both the EV, their hybrids, and their petrol
yeah.
derivatives. Changed the bumper up a little bit, and they've sort of given it a color-coded grille, but that's about, you really can't tell the difference between the two of them just on
And
face value.
I think another important thing to mention is that the XC40 range will be electrified in some way in
Yeah.
every model going
Yeah.
forward, whether that be a plug-in hybrid, a mild hybrid, or a full EV like the cars we have here.
Because, as we said, this is their first full EV offering,
Yeah.
is XC40,
Yeah.
which is rather late by my standards,
Yeah.
because they're claiming that they want to have a full EV lineup, the entire lineup being electrified by 2030.
Yeah.
And mate, that's 7.5 years away. That's
Yeah.
not a lot of R&D. I mean, I don't doubt that they've done R&D now in the background, but that's not leaving them a lot of time to switch over and to get customer buy-in on electrified vehicles. So
Yeah.
over the next 6-7 years, we're going to see a spill of full EV offerings being sold alongside their plug-in hybrids and their petrol offerings.
Yeah, I think as a brand, Volvo have been sort of future-proofing themselves from an electrification process. They started with the XC90. I remember attending that launch and them saying from the get-go, this vehicle's designed to be electrified in some way.
Yeah.
And then they brought out the T8, which was obviously the mild hybrid, the full hybrid, sorry. And that now that has been updated with even more range. So I think the brand, despite being slightly late to the EV party, from a local context, is actually quite well prepared going forward. I mean, if you look at these two, they're pretty much your most attainable, traditional style vehicles that are EVs in South Africa at the moment.
And in lieu of, especially locally, in lieu of their smaller compact vehicles, S40s, C40s and the likes, this is your entry point into Volvo now, is an XC40.
Yeah, so this is sort of the most attainable Volvo, and I think with the trend towards crossovers and SUVs, this is the sort of vehicle size and vehicle type that people are opting for more and more within the market. I don't think we'll see dramatic growth in the hatchback segment going forward. I think these crossover style
Not from
vehicles,
Volvo at least.
definitely not from Volvo.
I can't see them reintroducing the C locally. I just don't see, I don't think that they sell enough vehicles to warrant bringing in a maybe. They need to be pretty much guaranteed that what they're bringing in is going to sell.
Yeah.
So bold and ambitious that they're actually firing, the irony of firing on all cylinders with the EV, with the EV approach with the XC40. But the fact that we've got two models to choose from now is, well, rather appealing.
Yeah, and I think they've got really different buyers. I know, as weird as it sounds, you've got two vehicles here that you can't really tell apart if they park next to each other. Literally here in the studio, the only way you can tell is looking at the badge at the back. But I think for two vehicles that are so similar in appearance and their interiors as well, identical, I can't believe how different they are in terms of what they offer. I mean, the P8 is almost a performance car on stilts. It really feels like that. And this feels way more traditional. It doesn't have that ridiculous EV surge of acceleration and instant torque. Obviously, it's got instant torque, but it just doesn't have near the performance of that. So they've got really different audiences, and the cars are so similar in appearance. It's really...
So we've got the P6 and the P8. Let's just chat about how they're actually different and why you're saying one is sporty and the other one is more vanilla.
Yeah, it's the more so I've spent the past weekend, I know you've been driving the P8. I spent the weekend in the P6, and yeah, I've spent some time on the P8 as well, and it's a completely different experience. I mean, obviously this is now a single motor, that's a twin motor, so 170 kilowatts, 330 Newton meters.
This is for the P6.
For the P6 that I was driving this weekend.
Let's run through the specs here quickly. Single electric motor.
Front wheel drive, yes.
Front wheel drive only. There's no option for rear wheel drive. Power output?
So that's 170 kilowatts and 330 Newton meters. The battery pack is slightly smaller, so 69 kilowatt hours. But because it's obviously a single electric motor, lower outputs, its range is actually fairly similar to the P8 on paper, at least.
On paper. Real world, and I think we'll talk about that just now. Real world is a little different.
It's very different,
and it's actually not too dissimilar, really. Okay, so the P8 is a twin motor, all-wheel drive, motor up the front, motor at the rear, 300 kilowatts, 660 Newton meters. I mean, that's a lot of torque, but that's the beauty of EV. And then a 78 kilowatt hour battery. And that's, in layman's speak, basically almost like the size of the fuel tank. You know, how much charge can it store? But it's offset by the fact that you're needing to feed a 300 kilowatt, 660 Newton meter duo of motors. So we can understand that the range is somewhat similar and the consumption is somewhat similar, but the performance is considerably different.
It's worlds apart.
4.9 seconds, 0 to 100. Properly quick for a little compact SUV or crossover. 4.9 is shunting, but that's now traction as well because it is all-wheel drive. How does the P6 compare?
So 0 to 100, 7.4 seconds. So sort of hot hatch territory, I would say. Very similar to an internal combustion powered SUV in terms of performance.
We were taking a look at those numbers. We were chatting about it a little earlier, and that's sort of 2-litre turbo, you would say? 170, 330?
So, I mean, it's giving you essentially an internal combustion powered vehicle's performance. So it isn't as otherworldly as driving that, because that is, if you've come out of, let's say, for example, Volvo no longer make diesel motors, or they do, but they don't market and sell them in South Africa and in many global markets. If you come out of a D5 into a P8,
you're not going to be disappointed with the torque delivery.
No, you won't be, but you won't be disappointed with that either. You will be shocked when you get into that car and you accelerate for the first time, because that is...
And it's the thing that we always harp on about, is just, you know, EV talk. I think people are actually just much of hearing about EV talk. I've actually noticed that early EVs had a very linear delivery of that torque. It was straight from the get-go, it was just straight up, pulled all the way through to what was the red line. Whereas now they seem to be programming them a little more logarithmic or progressively, so they're metering in the torque, and I think it's a little bit safer and makes them a little more familiar to drive.
I think, and if you're looking for a sort of a replacement for, or a second vehicle in your garage that would replace, let's say, a T5, I think you're looking P6, very traditional in terms of the way it feels. It doesn't.
You're not going to be disappointed by going that route.
No, definitely not. No. Like I was saying about this one, super fast, and almost, if you have a Golf R, if you could consider the performance of a Golf R, that is pretty much what that's doing. 0 to 100 wise.
It's going to surprise them. They're going to have to be wide awake at the traffic light Grand Prix, because if they sleep on the line, game over. Would it be fair to say that this is now the most powerful, most performance-orientated XC40 that we've seen?
Definitely. It's definitely the most potent XC40 out there. I mean, I think the mild hybrid models will, or not the mild hybrid, the full hybrid models will give
PHEV ones. The
PHEV will give, especially the XC60s, they'll give this a good run for its money, performance-wise. But in terms of real-world accessible performance, it's very hard to beat these things. But I found myself, having experienced both of the vehicles, I found myself thinking, how many times can you get that hit, that acceleration, before it's just going to be like, meh, okay, it's fast, cool. And it's not really going to do anything for you anymore.
No longer exciting,
whereas this, the P6 for me, it just made more sense. I would, if it were my money, I would possibly go P6 instead of P8, because I don't think...
You don't need all of that.
Who needs a 300 kilowatt crossover? I mean, I know a lot of people say, I want a 300 kilowatt crossover, because that's what performance SUVs are so big.
Where can you actually utilize that power in your daily grind? you get the odd spurt here and there, putting a set of ears on the guy, the kiddo at the traffic light, and that's where the thrill factor comes in. But are you prepared to pay the premium for that odd occasion when seriously you're actually still going to do it in a P6?
Yeah. And speaking of price, I mean, look, there's no official pricing for the P6 yet. Indicative pricing over $1 million.
How much over $1 million? Just
I think that's all that I can. That's all
that
I
they were
know.
aiming to come in at under.
Yeah.
They were aiming to come in at under $1 million. Under $1 million is very attractive.
Yeah, it's that psychological barrier, and I think that's what they were aiming for with the vehicle. But it's not always realistic.
Yeah, it's not always possible, because unfortunately in South Africa they're still taxed to death.
Absolutely.
So that tax unfortunately needs to get passed on to the consumer. The manufacturer can't sit there and absorb all of that. That's not a sensible business model. You're going to buy a car, and in 6 months the whole company's going to go bang, and you've got no place to service it, and your car's worth nothing. So rather absorb that cost and just sort of live with it. $1.05 million, $1.1 million, we're probably looking about there.
I think that's sort of your ballpark, but there's no absolutes as of yet. And at the time of recording, this was 1.2 million.
1.2 on the nose.
I mean, I don't think you have better value EVs in the country right now. I think these take the cake at the moment.
What's next up from a P8 Twin?
What do you buy? Do you buy a BMW iX?
iX40. iX40 comes in at 1.650. 1.65. And that's before you've spec'd it, that's before you've thrown on whether it's a safety assistance package. You know, it's just one of those vehicles where you actually cannot buy one for 1.6 million rand.
Yeah.
It doesn't exist. A 1.65 million rand BMW iX doesn't exist because there's some shape, way or form of option that's been added to it that's going to bump the price. So you're probably looking realistically 1.750. Throwing 100k's worth of options on it is rather easy to do. You don't even bat an eyelid and you can do that. You could push that close to 2 bar if you really wanted to, if you wanted to go to town. 1.2.
And no options. You cannot spec anything apart from the color.
So then there's no surprises there.
Yeah.
There are no surprises.
And it's part of a package, remember?
So you get a package. Okay, so for that 1.2, we're getting 3 years Volvo insurance on the house. 3 years. 3 years, yeah. So if you decide you're going to finance it over 5 years, 3 of those years are covered for. Insurance on vehicles like this can cost about 1,000 rand for the, let's take a mean average. You're saving 1,000 rand a month on the insurance alone by purchasing this.
Easily, yes. And the package includes, they'll give you a charger. So
and not just the portable charger, they give you the cables and that, but they'll give you a home box that you can have installed. You can have that installed wherever you want it. In your home, which is very cool. And then I think one of the more forward-thinking aspects of this whole electric Volvo plan is the fact that they'll give you an internal combustion-powered XC40 for 2 weeks, once a year for the first 3 years of ownership. And that's very cool, because I know when I think about going on holiday in an EV, I took that BMW iX on a camping trip in December. And it was quite an anxious time for me, because I had to look where the nearest grid cars was. And if I had an internal combustion option at that point, I would have rather... You would have switched to that. I would have switched to that, yes. So it's for the holiday makers, and it's actually a wonderful... We often complain about, European solutions for African problems, because South Africa has a rather unique climate. Developing third world, we travel great distances, fuel quality isn't great, high altitude, hot climate. You know, we've got all these little contributing factors, right and drive, which makes things rather tricky for manufacturers, and that's why we get stiffed more often than not, and why some vehicles cost more than they actually should. But here they've come and they've actually assessed the South African driving habits. And they've said, it's cool, but what's one of the major pain points and stumbling stones that's making EV prohibitive for the consumer? You can drop your EV off, or give you a petrol-powered one, and use it for a couple of weeks, and bring it back. Let us service it. And I mean, that's what people also forget about EVs, is that these have got an impressive, while we're talking about the package, a rather impressive 5-year warranty and maintenance plan on it. And with that comes an 8-year warranty on the battery. 160,000 kilometers, 8 years. It's substantial. And I think that most new vehicle buyers will appreciate that sort of peace of mind.
Absolutely.
And the thing is, what are they going to replace? Because there's so few moving parts in this that you're doing tires. Tires are probably going to be for your account.
Yeah, they'll be for your account, yeah.
You know, they may even do brakes because there's not much else. They'll sit there and they'll go and do a system check. That's essentially what they're going to do.
There's so much regen on these things.
Yeah.
Like the brakes aren't even being used that often because the motor's slowing the car down and putting energy back into the battery pack. So I don't even know how heavy these things are going to be on brakes. We're hoping that they're using a friction-based system. Fun fact, these are rated to tow. Both of these are rated to tow 750 kilograms unbraked. Unbraked, sure.
Which is fairly impressive if you consider
bad.
South African lifestyles, and we're talking about solutions, towing trailers, Fenters, caravans and that. You're not going to get away with a caravan per se, maybe a small little gypsy Sprite or something, but it opens it up to the point where you can sit there and say, well, yeah, you know, if I need to remove garden rubble, I need to move something of the sort, you know, I can slap a fender on the back of it, and I can do it. Not many EVs are rated to tow. e-tron is one of the few ones, and now we've got the XC40, the baby in the Volvo range that is rated to tow. Top speeds are not amazing. This is just back to the performance. 160 kilometers an hour, 180 kilometers an hour, but that's also just a side effect of electric motors.
Yeah, they get more inefficient the higher you go in terms of speed.
They do.
And that's another point I wanted to raise was when we talk about energy consumption, there's a massive polarity between internal combustion and electric vehicles in terms of usage, because an internal combustion car is terrible in the city.
Oh, it hates it. It doesn't like idling.
It uses too much fuel. Your consumption goes up, and an EV gets better in traffic because
it wants to do stop-start.
Because it regens the whole time. So you use power, you put back in. You use power, put back in. Put this thing in cruise control on the highway for 20 Ks, and
you start seeing that consumption rise. So brings us neatly to what can we expect from range, because that's another massive thing.
Well, they claim these two cars are so similar in terms of their claimed range,
despite the fact that they're so different in terms of their power,
and so different to drive as well. It's crazy, but both around, let's say, 420 Ks.
400, they say between like 400 to the 14s, like 413, 415 sort of thing, and that's on the WLTP, which of course is motor on a bench, turn it to X amount, and that's it. It's impossible, simulated, almost impossible to achieve. So we're looking at realistic figures, 350 to 380 maybe?
Absolutely. I think today we had that fantastic experiment where both vehicles travel on the highway. We did about
same route,
60 kilometers or so. The vehicles were following each other. And the P8 registered an average kilowatt hour consumption of 23.2 kilowatt hours per 100 Ks, and this was the P6 was 20 kilowatt hours on the nose. So a saving of 3 kilowatt hours. Around 3 kilowatt hours, but you have to factor in there's around 10 kilowatt hour difference in the battery packs.
In the battery packs,
So that's where you get this similar range from. I think
swings and roundabouts, you know. If you want the same range from a smaller battery pack, well, we can't give you the same amount of power. It's that triangle. It can be fast, cheap, or good, and you sort of need to choose. You know, this can either be fast, efficient, or have a lot of range.
Yes.
And well, the efficiency is rather similar. But power in exchange for range, or you can have the same range, more power, but then your efficiency is not going to be as amazing.
And your price is going to be, you're paying essentially 200,000 Rand more to have something that can, compete with hot hatches in a drag race. So having with the P8 having a slightly larger battery, it is going to be the slightly more expensive one to run. As much as you're getting 400 kilometers, you still need to fill a 78 kilowatt hour battery. Versus the 64 of that one. 69, sorry. 69 kilowatt hour of the P6. So each charge is going to cost you a little bit more in the P8, but we're still looking at savings that are coming in 30% of regular fuel usage, easily, comfortably, and particularly if you're charging at home and using an 11 kilowatt wall box charger. The supplied cable is only going to do 3.4 kilowatts.
a wall box is going to be a little better, and it's going to cut those charging times down in half, because unfortunately on both of these, one of the slight detractions is that home charger, that portable charger, isn't the quickest charge. It's rather lengthy. It takes quite a long time to charge.
If you don't have because if you purchase one of these, you're going to have the home charger because it's supplied, right?
Yeah, and it's going to provide you up to about 22, depending on where it's installed and the power supply to your house. That'll go anywhere up to 22 kilowatts.
Which is very quick.
Very quick. Onboard charging on these, I am led to believe, please don't quote me, is still stuck at 11 kilowatts. So as much as you've got a 22 kilowatt charger, it's still only going to be able to accept 11. So let's work on 11 as a safe medium. 11 kilowatts. Going to definitely make it a lot quicker than a 7 or a 3 kilowatt charger.
Absolutely. And I think if people get into their heads that you can't treat an EV like an ICE or internal combustion engine
drive
car,
it until it's
you can't drive it until it's flat.
Yeah.
Treat it like you do your phone. I never let my phone really dip below 30-40%, right?
Yeah.
I always plug it in to make sure I've got battery in case of whatever.
And you do that at night?
I do that at night or in the day, or like wherever we pit, like at the office here, we've obviously got a grid charger here, and
we know we're going to be stationary for a while. It's not just to pop in, plug it in. I mean, it's pointless to sit there and say, okay, well, I'm popping out to the shops, I'm going to be in for 15 minutes, let me put it on charge.
Yeah.
You're only going to get about an additional maybe 7 to 10 Ks from the time that you spend in at the shops. So it's not really worthwhile doing it for these short periods of time. And I don't know that these batteries are clever. So they monitor their own health, and if they don't like the way that something's charging, they're either going to charge the amount of voltage allowed into it, or they're going to, sit there and condition the battery in a sense. So the technology is there to look after the batteries, and that's why they can offer an 8-year warranty on this stuff. Yeah. So you don't need to worry about hurting it the way we worried about early cell phone batteries. If you sit there and you plug it in, if it's at 98%, don't plug it in again, rather run the thing empty.
Yeah, run it empty.
I mean, now you get home from the shop and they tell you, listen, either you can plug it in if you want to, or you can just switch the thing on and run it dead. You don't need to condition the battery. It's sort of preconditioned. Yeah. And these are extremely convenient vehicles to own. They haven't encroached on the boot space any. Both of them still have a 545 litre boot, and of course foldable rear seats so that you can get larger stuff in. And it's almost like 1,900 litres that you can get in there. And there is a slight weight difference between these two. It's about 120 kilograms weight difference, but this one of course has an extra motor in it and a larger battery.
Yeah.
But it hasn't affected the handling that much, and that's what I really like about these.
Yeah, that's the thing with EVs, is that even if you're driving a compact crossover like this, the center of gravity has been brought down so low because there's a battery pack under the floor, or integrated into the floor.
Right between the axles.
Right between the axles, you've got this perfect weight distribution there.
Yeah.
And instead of having a heavy lump in front of you,
which I think is also sort of the reason why these feel a little strange, because I mean, you and I, we can say that I know what a mid-engined sports car feels like.
Yeah.
And the reason why they make it mid-engine is to bring that center of gravity in as close to the middle as possible and make it turn around the center. EVs do that just by having batteries.
And they do it in such an even way. Instead of having a motor sort of in the center of the car here, you've got an evenly distributed battery pack under the floor.
You've got rear seats, you've got legroom, transmission tunnels at the back, full step through. So it's really the modular platform has just worked wonders for this. And I think Volvo's tuned the suspensions really nicely on these.
And they've beefed up the brakes and everything. So I mean, everything is sort of been taken into account. All the performance credentials that the cars have now been taken into account.
It doesn't feel like an afterthought.
No, it almost feels like it was, which it was, obviously it was always designed to be an EV. And the fact that it has an internal combustion engine is just a product of where the world was when the XC40 was introduced.
Was developed,
Exactly.
I think you're quite right there that they had that foresight to say this vehicle is going to be electric at some point in its life.
Yeah.
Let's design it like that, but in the meantime, let's fit it with this internal combustion engine.
Yeah.
Get people used to the model, and then switch them over once the battery technology ramps up and is befitting of this model.
Yeah. I've been struggling to find something
to fault
the cars on, because they are genuinely good. I just think that the P8 might be a bit excessive for most people, and that P6 is really all you need. I mean, from if it's a second car in your garage, if you say, let's say you have a diesel bucky, buy one of these, then you've got a phenomenal 2-car garage. You've got South Africa's favorite vehicle type, with, I would say, South Africa's now second favorite vehicle type in a compact crossover.
Compact crossover, yeah.
And I think it just makes a lot of sense at this sort of price point now, because
the price is attractive. The price is very attractive.
That around that million, 1.1 million rand mark, that is what you'll pay for a premium internal combustion engine powered crossover in any case.
Yes.
With options these days.
I mean, the load shedding thing, I know people always come with it, and we've addressed it many times.
Yeah.
South Africa doesn't really have a problem with power delivery that would affect
an EV
quite yet. It just requires a slight shift in the thinking. Planning ahead, plugging it in overnight, and if you've got a wall box supplied by Volvo, once again, part of that package, and they're really making this attractive to consumers. The savings are there.
I think the P6 is such a great proposition in the market right now. I honestly cannot think of a better EV in the market right now. All factors that you just mentioned considered. There's value, space, range, and the package that the car comes with.
That package is so appealing.
It's so, because it's a solution. Every problem that people throw out, like the old, how am I going to get to Harrismith with the EV, you can go collect a petrol powered car. So
if you are that worried about it.
Exactly.
And it's a package that's not going to last forever, because the grid is constantly, every day the grid expands, and there are more charging points. We're not going to see it out in deepest, darkest Limpopo and that sort of stuff, where the infrastructure is still a little lacking. But as a city slicker, urban mobility, urban commuter, daily grind. And I mean, we haven't touched on it, but I mean, we don't really need to, because the badge says it all. We don't need to talk about the safety systems. It has it all.
It has everything, from full raft of semi-autonomous driving functionality.
Not even an option, it is just standard.
Everything comes with the vehicle. It comes back to the, what do you fault? What is really wrong? I mean,
the only thing that you need to ask yourself is, what color do I want my P6 in?
Absolutely. And the other problem is when they're going to get enough stock, because I think when the order books open, like the P8, they sold out immediately. So
this is going to fly.
So I think they are offering test drives. They're doing a little bit of a nationwide tour, Volvo, with these vehicles. So this one, once it leaves us, these two will disappear for a few weeks, and people at home can,
get an opportunity to sample it.
Can go and drive one of these. I mean, obviously, I would encourage you to drive both if you can, because the P8 is going to be, impressive from acceleration.
Actually, no, don't.
Because then you'll be like, I'll have to get the P8.
I'm going to have to get the P8. Oh, but that's 1.2 million rand.
The P6 is all you really need.
But all you need and more.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please tell us what you think in the comment section below. Don't forget to like, subscribe to the AutoTrader YouTube channel. Cheers for now.